In a new design, I'll begin with simply importing a pre-made model, as this can often be a starting point. To do this, go to File, Open, then you can select the model either locally from your computer or from your Fusion files if you have uploaded it to Fusion. You can do this from the Data panel. These imported models will often need some edits to prepare them for 3D printing. Whether this is the case or you're creating a model from scratch, you'll need to be familiar with the design tools, so we'll have a look at how to use these now. A lot of the time, you will start off by creating a 2D sketch, then use this to build up a 3D model. The first tool on the design toolbar is Create Sketch. Select this, then the next selection that is made is always to define the 2D plane which this sketch will exist on. As this is a blank document, we just have the origin planes to choose from, but I could select any created plane or flat surface. I can select my plane and then you'll see that the toolbar changes to now show me the sketching tools. There are a wide range of tools which I can use. The simplest sketch item is a line. By selecting line, I activate the tool. Then I can simply click the left mouse button to define the start and end points of the line in turn. The tool will stay active so that I can chain these lines together. You'll see as I do this, a dimension is attached to the line. I can either sketch the lines by eye or type in specific length and angle dimensions to define the size and direction of the line. When you sketch geometry to create a closed profile, this will turn blue, as you can see here. This profile can then be used in later operations. Once I've finished sketching my lines, I can press the green tick in the Fusion window to OK them and continue, or simply escape on the keyboard to exit out of this tool. As well as when they are created, I can also dimension the lines at this point, using the Dimension tool from the toolbar. Same as whilst creating the lines, I can then type in specific length and angle values. There are many other sketching tools to create other simple geometry types, such as rectangles, circles and arcs. You'll notice for some of these there are multiple options. These are just for different ways of defining the shape. They all work in the same basic way though. Left mouse click to define each point on the geometry, and you can then dimension these as you create them or afterwards using the Dimension tool again. The main sketching tools are split into two drop-down lists, Create and Modify. As the name suggests, Create is for sketching any new geometry, so for example sketching a circle, whereas Modify is then for editing these geometries. The Modify tools include adding a fillet between two straight lines, which can be useful for removing sharp corners when 3D printing, or trimming sketch geometry which overlaps. It's worth remembering at this stage you can always undo any operation within Fusion 360 if you make a mistake by pressing Ctrl Z on the keyboard or undo up in the top left of the window. Once we are done defining geometry for this sketch, we need to exit out of the Sketch tool to go back to the main design workspace. To do this, you can select Finish Sketch either from the toolbar or from the sketch palette. You'll see that the toolbar changes back to show us the solid modelling tools. Let's now have a look at these. Like the sketching tools, the solid modelling tools are also split into two main drop-down lists, Create and Modify. Again, the Create tools are what we can use to first produce the 3D geometries, and the Modify tools are used to edit these, such as applying fillets or chamfers, or scaling a model. One of the most commonly used Create tools is Extrude, which is how we will very often go from a 2D sketch to 3D geometry. Extrude allows you to select a 2D profile and extrude this out in one or two directions to convert it to 3D solid geometry. It can also be used to cut away material from existing bodies. This 2D profile could be a sketch, or if available, could be an existing face of a solid body. The distance of the extrude can be defined by typing in a specific value, or done visually using the interactive arrow. Other options are available, such as if the extrude is in one or two directions. Once you are happy with the options, select OK to apply the extrude. We can see there are a number of tools in the Create list, which work in fairly similar ways to extrude. We won't have a look at all of them now, instead you can try them out in your own time. But it's worth knowing if you hover your mouse over any tool in Fusion 360, a tooltip will appear which gives you a description of what it is used for. Very useful when first figuring out what all these tools do. With a solid body now created, I could now apply the tool from the Modify list. Let's apply a fillet. Again, this can be useful for removing sharp corners. For this, I simply need to select the edge or edges I want to apply the fillet to, and again, can either enter the specific value for the size of this, or use the arrow to size it. Once happy, I'll select OK. You'll now notice along the bottom of the screen, we have a few items which have appeared in what's called our timeline. This is a record of everything we've created on our model. And every time we make a new sketch or add a feature, it will appear in the timeline. This allows us to go back in our timeline to make an edit to an item. And this edit will then be incorporated with all items coming after it, where appropriate. For example, I can go back and edit my original sketch by double-clicking on it in the timeline or right-clicking and edit sketch. I can now, for example, change the size of this sketch. And when I finish the sketch to exit out of the edit mode, you'll see this change is applied to the other features in the timeline, so the extrude and the fillet are updated to match. Similarly, I can edit these features from the timeline too. This is a very powerful capability when modelling, especially in cases where you may need to go back and make small changes to the design later on, which can be very common when prototyping using additive manufacturing methods. One way to get even more control over this is by using parametric modelling. This will allow you to control dimensions and values using defined parameters, so that if edits to the model are needed, you can control these using the parameters, rather than needing to go back and change every value. These parameters can be set using change parameters in the Modify drop-down list. Here you can define a parameter and its value, and these parameters can be linked to each other using expressions. For example, I can create width, length, and height parameters, which are all linked to each other. I could then use these in my original sketch and extrude operation. This means that if I need to change the size of this body, I simply need to change the value of the width parameter, and the others will update automatically. This again can save a lot of time when carrying out iterative prototyping work with additive methods. For a more detailed look at a parametric modelling example, please look at the step-by-step guide which accompanies this video, and you'll also see self-paced guides for the other topics covered too. Once happy with these steps, we can move on to the next stage.